thought Aella Sterling was the love of my life. We were 3 days away from our wedding when she shattered everything by running back to her ex-boyfriend, Easton King, leaving me humiliated at the altar in front of 200 guests. Him, over our 3-year relationship and our entire future together. But then something impossible happened. I woke up exactly 1 year earlier, back to the day I first met both Sterling sisters at that charity gala in Brookhaven City. This time I had a year of painful knowledge about who Aella really was. I knew exactly what I had to do. Instead of falling for Aella's charm again, I walked straight up to her older sister Leila Stone, the successful attorney everyone said was too intimidating for relationships. This time, I would be the one making the choice first. This time, I would build something real with someone who actually deserved it. And when Aella tried to win me back, well, let's just say she was in for the shock of her life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Augustine Cathedral in Brookhaven City, casting rainbow patterns across the white marble floor where I stood adjusting my black tie for the 100th time. My hands trembled slightly as I checked my watch. 11:30 a.m. in 30 minutes. Aella Sterling would walk down that aisle in the dress we'd chosen together, and I'd finally call her my wife. "Relax, Quillen," my best man Rogers said, straightening. "My boutonniere, you look like you're about to throw up."
I managed.
Weak smile. Just service energy. 3 years of dating, and I still can't believe she said yes to a guy like me. Rogers laughed. "Are you kidding? You're the one who turned that struggling marketing firm into the most successful agency in Brookhaven. Allah's lucky to have you." That's not how I felt. Leila Sterling was everything I'd ever dreamed of. Stunning blonde hair that caught light like spun gold. Emerald eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul, and a laugh that could make me forget every problem. In the world, she was a successful event planner with connections throughout the city's elite social circles. While I was just a small-town guy who'd gotten lucky in business, the cathedral was packed with 200 guests. Her family, my family, business. Associates and friends who'd traveled from across the country to witness our union. My mother sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, while my father kept checking his pocket watch with military precision. I'd spent months planning this day. The reception at the Grandview Ballroom overlooking Brookhaven Bay. The honeymoon in Santorini that had cost me 3 months' salary. The down payment on the house in Hillcrest District where we'd planned to start our family. Everything was perfect. The organ began playing Pachelbel's canon, and the massive cathedral. Doors opened. My heart stopped as I saw Allea's maid of honor, her sister Leila Stone, walking down the aisle in an elegant navy dress. Leila was older by 3 years, a successful attorney with sharp features and an intimidating confidence that made most men keep their distance. Where Aella was warm sunshine, Leila was cool moonlight, beautiful in a completely different way, but somehow always overshadowed by her younger sister's vivacious charm. But where was Aella? Leila reached the altar and gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Was that pity in her eyes? She took her position and nodded toward the doors. But instead of my radiant bride, Father Morrison walked toward me with heavy steps. "Quillen," he whispered, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "I need to speak with you privately." The wedding music continued playing, but something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Roger stepped closer as we moved to the side chapel, and I could hear the murmur of confused voices from the congregation. "What's happening?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Father Morrison's weathered face was grave. "I'm afraid Aella won't be coming today. She asked me to give you this." He handed me an envelope with my name written in Allea's distinctive handwriting. My fingers felt numb as I tore it open, and the words on the page seemed to blur together. "Quillen, I'm so sorry to do this to you, especially like this. But I can't go through with the wedding. Easton came back. He's changed, and he wants to make things work between us. I know I'm hurting you, but I have to follow my heart. What we had was beautiful, but it wasn't enough. I hope someday you'll understand and forgive me. The ring is with Leila." A lathe paper slipped from my hands and fluttered to the floor. Easton King, her ex-boyfriend from college who'd broken her heart 2 years ago when he'd chosen his career over their relationship. The same Easton who'd called her crying 3 months ago, begging for another chance, only to have Aella tell me she was completely over him. "Sir," Father Morrison's voice seemed to come from underwater. "What would you like me to tell the congregation?" I stared at the crucifix above the altar, the same one where Aella and I had taken our engagement photos just 6 months ago. 200 people were waiting for an explanation. My parents had flown in from Oregon. Her grandmother had traveled from Scotland. The reception was paid for, the honeymoon was booked, and the house deposit was non-refundable, but none of that mattered compared to the hollow ache spreading through my chest like poison. "Tell them, ... I started, then stopped. What could I possibly say? That the woman I'd planned to spend my life with had chosen her ex-boyfriend over 3 years of love, loyalty, and commitment. That she'd let me stand at the altar in front of everyone we knew while she ran off with the man who'd already broken her heart once. Tell them the wedding is canceled," finally managed. Rogers placed a steadying hand on my back as we walked toward the congregation. The whispers grew louder as I approached the microphone at the front of the cathedral. 200 faces stared back at me, some confused, some sympathetic, others already pulling out their phones to spread the gossip. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice echoing through the sacred space where I'd imagined saying I do to the love of my life. "I'm afraid there won't be a wedding today. Aella has ... chosen a different path." The murmurs erupted into full conversations as people processed what had happened. I caught sight of my mother's shocked face and my father's clenched jaw, but it was Leila's expression that haunted me. She looked genuinely devastated, as if she'd tried to stop this disaster but failed. As guests began filing out of the cathedral, some offering hollow condolences as they passed, I remained frozen. At the altar, the rainbow patterns from the stained glass windows seemed to mock me now. Beautiful and ethereal, but ultimately just illusions created by broken light. Roger stayed by my side as the cathedral emptied, eventually even Father Morrison retreated to give me space. In the silence that followed, I could hear my own heartbeat echoing off the vaulted ceiling. 3 years of my life. 3 years of believing in a future that apparently meant nothing to her. 3 years of thinking I'd found my soulmate, only to discover I was just a placeholder till something better came along. The worst part wasn't the public humiliation or the financial loss. It was realizing that while I'd been planning our forever, Aella had been waiting for her past to call her back. As I finally walked out of St. Augustine Cathedral, still wearing my wedding tuxedo but carrying no bride, I made a silent promise. To myself, I would never again put my faith in someone who could throw away years of love for the fantasy of what used to be. If only I had known then that I'd get the chance to keep that promise in ways I never could have imagined. The sound of champagne glasses clinking and elegant laughter pulled me from what felt like the deepest sleep of my life. My eyes snapped open, expecting to see the familiar ceiling of my bedroom where I'd collapsed after the wedding disaster, still wearing my rumpled tuxedo and drowning in whiskey. Instead, I found myself standing in the middle of the Brookhaven Grand Ballroom, wearing a perfectly pressed navy suit I recognized but hadn't seen in over a year. The crystal chandeliers above cast warm golden light over hundreds of guests in formal attire, and a string quartet played softly near the dance floor. "What the hell?" I whispered, touching my face with trembling hands. My skin felt smoother, younger somehow. The stress lines that had developed around my eyes over the past year of wedding planning were gone. What? Waiter appeared beside me with a silver tray. "Champagne, sir?" I stared at him in confusion. He was young, maybe 22, with bright, eager eyes. "Tommy?" I asked, recognizing one of the servers from my old catering company that had gone out of business 8 months ago. "Yes, sir." "Do we know each other?" Tommy smiled politely, clearly not recognizing me. My heart began racing as I looked around the ballroom with new eyes. The decorations, the guests, even the smell of the signature cocktails, everything was exactly as I remembered from a year ago. This was the annual Brookhaven Charity Gala for the Children's Hospital. It's the event where I'd first met Aella Sterling, but that was impossible. The gala had happened 12 months ago, 3 days before Aella and I had our first official date. I'd been here as a guest of my business partner, trying to network and land new clients for our struggling marketing firm. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. The date on the screen made my knees nearly buckle. March 15th, exactly 1 year before my wedding day. The same day that had changed my entire life, for better and worse. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "This isn't real," I muttered, running my hands through my hair. I'm having some kind of breakdown, but everything felt real. The weight of my body, the sound of conversations around me, the scent of expensive perfume mixing with the floral arrangements. If this was a hallucination, it was the most vivid one in medical history. A burst of familiar laughter made me turn toward the auction display area, and my breath caught in my throat. There she was, Aella Sterling, looking exactly as she had that first night. Her golden hair was styled in an elegant updo, and she wore a stunning emerald dress that brought out her eyes. She was examining a painting with the same animated excitement I remembered, sousing enthusiastically as she spoke to a small group of admirers. Standing beside her, looking slightly annoyed by the attention her sister was receiving, was Leila Stone. She wore a sophisticated black dress and maintained the same composed, professional demeanor that had intimidated me the first time we'd met. While Aella chatted vivaciously with potential bidders, Leila checked her phone with the efficiency of someone who had better places to be. My mind raced as memories came flooding back. In my original timeline, I'd spent the entire evening trying to work up the courage to approach Aella. I'd watched her from across the room for 2 hours, captivated by her charm and beauty, before finally introducing myself during the silent auction. We'd talked about art, travel, and our shared love of old movies until the event ended. And I'd left with her number and a date planned for that weekend, but now I knew how that story ended. I knew about the 3 years of relationship building, the proposal she'd said yes to with tears of joy, the months of wedding planning, and the devastating letter that had shattered everything just 3 days ago. Or was it a year from now? "Sir, are you all right?" Tommy the waiter had returned, looking concerned. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I laughed, but it came out hollow and slightly hysterical. Something like that. But if this was real and every fiber of my being was beginning to believe it was, then I had been given something impossible, a second chance. Not just to avoid the heartbreak, but to make completely different choices with the benefit of hindsight. I thought about the past year of my life in this timeline that I apparently now had the opportunity to live again. My marketing firm had been struggling then, barely keeping the lights on. I'd been working 16-hour days, desperate to land major clients and prove myself in Brookhaven's competitive business environment. Meeting Aella had been the bright spot in an otherwise stressful period. It's the beginning of what I'd thought was the best chapter of my life. But I also remembered what else had happened during that year. Easton King had been dating a supermodel in New York, completely out of Aella's life. Leila had been going through a difficult divorce from her ambitious husband who cheated on her with his secretary. My business partner Rogers had been considering leaving the firm to join a larger agency with better benefits. Most importantly, I remembered every conversation I'd had with Aella, every date, every fight, every moment of doubt I'd pushed aside, because I'd been so infatuated with her beauty and charm. I remembered the times she'd mentioned Easton wistfully, the way she'd sometimes seem distant when we talked about the future, the red flags I'd ignored because I'd been so desperate to believe in our fairy tale romance. I whispered to myself, the words carrying weight I'd never imagined possible. But this time, I wouldn't be the naive romantic who fell for the first beautiful woman who showed him attention. This time, I would be strategic. This time I would make choices based on character and compatibility. It's not just attraction and wishful thinking. I looked across the ballroom again, but instead of focusing on Allea's magnetic smile, I found myself studying Leila. In my previous timeline, I'd barely spoken to her beyond polite greetings at family events. She'd always seemed too serious, too focused on her career, too intimidating for someone like me to approach. Aella had often complained that her sister was married to her job and would never find happiness if she didn't learn to have fun. But now, with the wisdom of hindsight, I saw Leila differently. She'd been the one to support Aella through every relationship drama. She'd been the one working late into the night building her law practice from the ground up. She'd been the one who'd looked genuinely devastated when she'd had to hand me that engagement ring at the SE Cathedral. While Aella had been charming everyone at parties, Leila had been building something substantial. While Aella had been dreaming about her past with Easton, Leila had been focused on creating her own future. I straightened my tie and took a deep breath. The Quillen Hayes who had attended this gala the first time had been desperate to prove himself, worthy of Aella Sterling's attention. But the Quillen Hayes standing here now had different priorities entirely. This time, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. This time, I'd walk straight up to Leila Stone and find out what I'd been missing all along. I stood at the crossroads of my destiny, champagne glass in hand, watching the two Sterling sisters across the ballroom in my original timeline. This had been the moment that changed everything. I'd spent 2 hours working up the courage to approach Aella, rehearsing opening lines and trying to calm my nerves. I'd been so focused on her radiant smile and the way she commanded attention from everyone around her. But now, armed with the painful knowledge of where that path led, I found myself studying the scene with completely different eyes. Aella was holding court near the silent auction display, her emerald dress catching the light as she gestured animatedly while discussing a painting of the Brookhaven lighthouse. She had 3 potential bidders hanging on her every word, each one clearly hoping to impress her enough to earn her phone number. The same magnetic charm that had first drawn me to her was working its magic on a new audience. Meanwhile, Leila stood slightly apart from the group, checking what appeared to be urgent emails on her phone. She'd occasionally glance up when someone approached her with legal questions, apparently. Her reputation as one of Brookhaven's most successful attorneys preceded her even at charity events. In my previous life, I'd barely noticed Leila that night. She'd been background noise to Alice Symphony, but now I could see what I'd missed. The quiet confidence in her posture, the sharp intelligence in her dark eyes, the way she listened intently when people spoke to her instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. "You can do this," I whispered to myself, straightening my shoulders. Different choice, different life. I made my way across the ballroom, weaving between clusters of Brookhaven's elite. Several people nodded politely as I passed. My marketing firm might have been struggling, but I'd worked hard to build a network in this city. The closer I got to the Sterling sisters, the more my heart pounded. But this time it wasn't from nervousness about approaching a beautiful woman. It was from the surreal knowledge that I was about to change the entire trajectory of my existence. As I approached, I could hear Allea's laugh ringing out over the conversation. Oh, I just love how the artist captured the moonlight on the water. It reminds me of those romantic walks on the beach in Santorini. Have any of you been? It's absolutely magical. I slowed my steps, remembering how that exact comment had been my opening line in the original timeline. I'd mentioned that I'd always wanted to visit Greece, and she'd spent 20 minutes describing her trip there with college friends, including, though I hadn't known it at the time, several romantic getaways with Easton King. But this time, I walked right past Allea's group and approached Leila, who was finishing up what looked like a tense email exchange. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "I hate to interrupt, but are you Leila Stone, the attorney who won the Richardson development case last month?" Leila looked up from her phone, surprise flickering across her features. She was even more striking up close than I'd remembered. High cheekbones, intelligent dark eyes, and an air of competence that was somehow more attractive than any amount of charm. "Yes, that's me," she replied, slipping her phone into her. "Kletch, I'm sorry, have we met?" "Quillen Hayes." I extended my hand, which she shook with a firm, confident grip. "I run Hayes and Associates Marketing. I've been following your work. That Richardson case was brilliant. The way you proved the environmental impact studies were falsified saved that entire neighborhood from becoming another strip mall wasteland." For the first time since I'd been watching her, Leila's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing genuine surprise. "You actually read the case files? Most people just saw the headlines about the corrupt developers." "I make it my business, too." "Know what's happening in Brookhaven?" I said, and it was true. In my previous timeline, I'd studied that case because I'd been hoping to land some of the local businesses as clients after the development was blocked. What you did took real courage. Going up against Morrison Development couldn't have been easy. Couldn't have been easy. Leila's eyes narrowed slightly, but not in suspicion, more like she was reassessing me. Most people at these events want to talk about anything except work. They think attorney small talk is deadly boring. Most people haven't spent 3 years building a business from scratch, I replied. I find dedication fascinating, regardless of the field. Behind us, I could hear Ella's voice growing slightly louder, as if she was trying to draw attention back to her group. In my peripheral vision, I caught her glancing our way with obvious curiosity. This was already different from the original timeline, instead of me being captivated by her. She was wondering why I wasn't paying her any attention. Hayes and Associates, Leila mused, tilting her head thoughtfully. You're the firm that did that brilliant campaign for the Harbor District Revitalization Project. I remember thinking someone finally understood how to market urban renewal without gentrification buzzwords. I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. In my original timeline, Aella had never shown any interest in my work beyond asking if it was going well in the most general terms possible. But Leila had not only noticed my campaigns, she'd analyzed them thoughtfully. You really pay attention, I said. Most people see marketing as necessary evil at best. Good marketing tells stories that matter, Leila replied. Bad marketing is just manipulation, dressed up with pretty pictures. Your Harbor District campaign told the story of a community preserving its character while embracing progress. That's not easy to do. Our conversation was interrupted by a familiar voice that made my stomach clench with remembered pain. Leila. There you are. Leila peered at her sister's side, her smile bright but her eyes calculating as she looked between us. I was wondering where you disappeared to. Just having a conversation about urban development law, Leila replied dryly. Riveting party talk, as usual. Aella laughed, the same musical sound that had once made my heart skip beats. My sister has no sense of social timing. I'm Aella Sterling, by the way. She extended her hand to me with a practiced grace that I now recognize as performance rather than genuine warmth. Quillen Hayes, I replied, shaking her hand politely, but keeping my attention primarily on Leila. Your sister was just explaining the finer points of environmental law. Fascinating stuff. Watched Ella's expression shift slightly. In the original timeline, she'd been the center of attention, the one men approached at parties. Having someone more interested in talking to her boring sister than flirting with her was clearly a new experience. Well, Aella said, her smile becoming slightly forced. I suppose everyone has their interests.
Ow.
Leila's always been the serious one in the family. Serious about things that matter? I replied, earning a surprised look from Leila and a barely concealed frown from Aella. The auction announcement saved us from further awkwardness. But as we moved toward the bidding area, I felt the weight of the choice I'd just made. In my original timeline, by this point, Aella and I had been deep in conversation about travel and art, laying the groundwork for our first date. But this time, I'd chosen substance over surface, depth over charm, and the woman who built things over the woman who collected experiences. This time, I'd chosen Leila Stone, and from the way Aella kept glancing over at us during the auction, it was clear she had no idea how to handle being the sister who wasn't chosen first. The week following the charity gala, threw myself into reshaping my life with the precision of a chess master who could see 20 moves ahead. Having lived through this year once before, I knew exactly which opportunities were coming and which disasters to avoid. But more importantly, I had a clear vision of the kind of man I wanted to become and the kind of woman who deserved that man. My first strategic move came on Monday morning when I walked into Rogers's office at our struggling marketing firm. In my original timeline, we'd spent months chasing small accounts and barely keeping the lights on. But I remembered something crucial. In 3 weeks, Meridian Tech would be looking for a new marketing agency after their current firm botched. A major product launch? Rogers, we need to prepare a presentation for Meridian Tech, I announced, spreading the preliminary research I'd stayed up all night creating across his desk. Rogers looked up from his coffee, confused. Meridian Tech? They're locked into a 2-year contract with Sterling and Associates. There's no way they're switching agencies. I smiled, remembering how shocked I'd been in my previous life when news broke about Sterling and Associates' spectacular failure with Meridian's quantum computing launch. Trust me on this one. In exactly 3 weeks, they're going to need a new agency desperately, and we're going to be ready. The second part of my strategy was more personal, but equally important. That Tuesday evening, I found myself outside Pinnacle Legal, the downtown law firm where Leila worked. I'd learned from our conversation at the gala that she'd been pulling 70-hour weeks on a class action environmental lawsuit against Hartwell Industries. In my original timeline, I'd barely paid attention to local news beyond what affected my business. But now I knew that Hartwell had been dumping chemical waste in Millfield Creek for years, and the evidence was hidden in their subsidiary companies' filing records. Information that wouldn't surface for another month without intervention. Quillen. Leila emerged from the building at nearly 9 p.m., looking surprised to see me waiting by the fountain in the plaza. "What are you doing here?" "Bringing you dinner," I replied, holding up a bag from Romano's. The Italian place she'd mentioned was her favorite during our brief conversation. "And maybe some information that might help with the Hartwell case." Her eyebrows rose skeptically. "You know about the Hartwell case?" "I know about a lot of things that might interest you," I said. "Then, but first, when was the last time you ate something?" "That wasn't from a vending machine?" Despite her obvious exhaustion, Leila laughed, a genuine sound that was completely different from Aella's performative giggle. "You've been talking to my assistant, haven't you? She's always trying to get me to eat real meals." We sat on the plaza bench, and as Leila gratefully dug into the chicken parmigiana, I pulled out a folder I'd carefully prepared. "Have you looked into Hartwell's subsidiary companies?" I asked. "Specifically, Clearwater Solutions?" Leila paused mid-bite. "How do you know about Clearwater?" "I have a friend who used to work in environmental consulting," I lied smoothly. "Mention that. Companies often hide their dirtiest work behind shell corporations. Clearwater has been filing permit applications for water treatment services in the Millfield area. But their actual operations might tell a different story." I watched Leila's sharp mind process this information, her dark eyes lighting up with the thrill of a new lead. In my original timeline, I'd been attracted to Ella's beauty and charm, but watching Leila's intellectual passion was infinitely more compelling. "This could be the missing piece," she murmured, scanning the documents I'd compiled. "If we can prove Clearwater is just a Hartwell front operation, then you can establish a pattern of deliberate deception rather than just negligence. Finished. Which changes everything about damages and criminal liability." Leila looked at me with new respect. "You have a very strategic mind, Quillen Hayes." Over the following 2 weeks, our evening meetings became routine. I'd bring dinner, and we'd discuss her cases while I provided insights that seemed to come from good research but were actually memories of future news stories. The Hartwell lead I'd given her was paying off brilliantly, and her case was strengthening by the day. But our conversations weren't just about work. I'd learned that Leila had wanted to be a marine biologist before law school. She still volunteered at the aquarium on weekends, and that she'd started practicing law because she wanted to protect the environment her scientist dreams had been built around. She learned that I'd grown up in a small coastal town, that my marketing philosophy was built on authentic storytelling, and that I believed business should serve communities, not exploit them. The more time we spent together, the more I understood what I'd missed in my original timeline. Where Aella had been entertaining but ultimately shallow, Leila was genuinely fascinating. Where Aella had been charming but self-focused, Leila was thoughtful and engaged with the world around her. My third strategic move came when Rogers burst into my office on a Thursday morning, eyes wide with excitement. "You're not going to believe this," he said, waving a newspaper. "Sterling and Associates just got fired by Meridian Tech. Something about a disastrous product launch that made their quantum computing system sound like a kitchen appliance." I kept my expression carefully neutral. "It's unfortunate for them." "Did we finish our Meridian presentation?" "Finished it yesterday, just like you insisted." "But Quillen, how did you know?" "Lucky guess," I replied. "Sometimes you can feel when the wind is about to change." By Friday afternoon, we had a meeting scheduled with Meridian Tech for the following Monday. The presentation I'd crafted was based on everything I learned about their actual needs and concerns from my previous timeline. We were going to win this account, and it would transform our firm from struggling startup to serious player in Brookhaven's business community. That evening, Leila and I shared Chinese takeout in her office while she prepared for a crucial Hartwell deposition. I felt a satisfaction I'd never experienced in my original timeline. You know, Leila said, looking up from her legal briefs. 3 weeks ago, I thought my biggest problem was this case and my sister constantly trying to set me up with fun. Guys who were completely wrong for me. And now? I asked. She smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, the expression was completely unguarded. Now I'm thinking maybe I've been looking for the wrong kind of person all along. As I walked home that night, I reflected on how different this path felt from my previous life. With Aella, I'd always been trying to prove myself worthy of her attention. But with Leila, we were building something together. A partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine intellectual connection. In 3 days, I'd land the Meridian account that would secure my business future. In 2 weeks, Leila would win the Hartwell case that would make her one of the most respected environmental attorneys in the state. But most importantly, I was falling for a woman who valued substance over surface, dedication over charm, and authenticity over performance. This time, I was building a love story on solid ground instead of shifting sand. 6 weeks after the charity gala, transformation was undeniable. I stood in the conference room of our newly expanded offices, watching the Meridian Tech executives sign our 6-figure contract while Rogers tried to contain his excitement behind a professional smile. The quantum computing campaign we'd pitched had exceeded every expectation, and suddenly Hayes & Associates was the most talked-about marketing firm in Brookhaven. "Exceptional work, Quillen," said David Chen, Meridian's CEO, shaking my hand firmly. "Your team's understanding of our technology and market position was unprecedented. We've never had an agency grasp our vision so completely from day one." Smiled, knowing that my unprecedented understanding came from having lived through their previous agency's failures. "We believe in doing our homework, Mr. Chen. Success comes from truly understanding our clients' needs, not just what they think they want." As the Meridian team left, Rogers practically bounced over to me. 6 months ago, we were eating ramen noodles for lunch and wondering if we could make rent. Now, we're the agency everyone wants to work with. How did you see this coming? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Leila. Hartwell settlement finalized. $50 million for cleanup and victims? Dinner to celebrate? I'm buying champagne. I grinned, typing back quickly. Only if it's the good stuff. You just became the most feared environmental attorney in 3 states. Rogers noticed my expression. Let me guess, Leila Stone won another impossible case? The Hartwell chemical dumping case. Biggest environmental settlement in Brookhaven's history, I replied, gathering my things. And that's my cue to leave. Some celebrations are more important than contracts. You know, Rogers said thoughtfully, when you first started spending time with her, I thought you were crazy. Everyone knows Aella Sterling is the gorgeous, fun sister. But watching you two together, I've never seen you this happy. He was. Right. In my original timeline, even during the best moments with Aella, there had always been an underlying tension, the sense that I was performing to keep her interest, that I needed to be worthy of her attention. With Leila, I felt like my best self naturally, challenged to grow intellectually and personally, without feeling judged or found wanting. An hour later, I found Leila in her office, still in her courtroom attire, but with her hair down and a genuine smile that lit up her entire face. The champagne was already open, and she'd cleared space on her desk between the legal briefs. "To justice," she said, raising her glass. "To the woman who made it happen," I replied, clinking my glass against hers as we celebrated. Leila told me about the settlement negotiations, how the evidence I'd helped her find had been the key to breaking Hartwell's stonewalling tactics. But more than her professional triumph, was struck by her passion for the work itself, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about protecting Millfield Creek, about the families who could now afford medical treatment for their health problems. You know what the best part is? She said, leaning back in her chair. 3 months ago, I was just another overworked attorney drowning in cases. Then you showed up with Romano's takeout and environmental research, and suddenly everything clicked into place. Maybe we bring out the best in each other, I suggested. Maybe we do, she agreed, her dark eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my heart race. Our moment was interrupted by a knock on the office door. Leila's assistant peeked in apologetically. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see Mr. Hayes. Says it's urgent. To my surprise, Aella Sterling stepped into the office, looking perfectly put together as always, but with something frantic in her eyes that I'd never seen before. She glanced between Leila and me, taking in the champagne and our clearly intimate atmosphere. Aella said, surprised. What are you doing here? I was looking for Quillen, Aella replied, her usual confident smile seeming forced. I heard about the Meridian account. Congratulations. Damn, very impressive. Thank you, I said politely, but didn't elaborate. At my original timeline, I would have been thrilled by her attention, eager to share every detail of my success. Now her presence felt like an interruption. I was wondering, Aella continued, her voice slightly higher than usual, if you'd like to have coffee sometime. I've been thinking about our conversation at the gala, and I realized we never really got to finish talking. The request hung in the air awkwardly. Leila looked confused. She clearly remembered that Aella and I had barely exchanged more than pleasantries at the charity event. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I'm pretty busy with work these days, and I spend most of my free time here. I gestured toward Leila with unmistakable affection. Allah's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. Of course. I just thought, well, most men find me easy to talk to. The comment revealed more than she'd probably intended. The first time, I was seeing Aella Sterling off balance, unsure of herself in a way that would have been impossible for me to imagine in my previous life. I'm sure they do, I replied diplomatically. You have a gift for making people feel welcomed. But even as I said it, I realized the difference. Aella made people feel welcomed in her presence, but Leila made me feel welcomed in my own skin. Aella was charming, but Leila was inspiring. Aella was entertaining, but Leila was engaging. After Aella left, clearly frustrated by the interaction, Leila turned to me with raised eyebrows. That was strange, she said. My sister doesn't usually chase after men. They usually chase after her. Maybe she's not used to not being the center of attention, I suggested. Leila laughed, but there was something thoughtful in her expression. You know, growing up, Aella never had to work for male attention. It just came naturally to her. I always assumed that was easier, but watching her just now, maybe it made her less equipped to handle rejection. As we finished our champagne, and I walked Leila to her car, I reflected on how dramatically our paths had diverged from my original timeline. 6 weeks ago, Aella had been the object of my obsession while Leila had been barely a footnote in my life. Now, Aella was pursuing me while I was building something meaningful with her sister. Dinner tomorrow? Leila asked as she got into her car. I'll cook this time. No takeout containers. I'd love that, I replied, leaning down to kiss her goodnight, still a new enough development that it made my heart skip as I watched her drive away. I caught sight of Allea's car still parked. Across the street, engine running. She was watching us, and even from a distance. I could see the confusion and frustration in her posture. For the first time in either of my timelines, Aella Sterling was experiencing what it felt like to want something she couldn't have. And I found I didn't feel sorry for her at all 6 months into my new timeline. The annual Brookhaven Business Excellence Awards arrived like a storm I'd been preparing for my entire second life. In my original timeline, this event had been a modest affair where I'd networked desperately while Aella charmed potential clients at my side. But this year, everything was different. Hayes and Associates had been nominated for Marketing Innovation of the Year for our Meridian Tech campaign, while Leila's environmental law practice was up for Legal Excellence in Public Service for the Hartwell victory. We were both being recognized as Brookhaven's rising stars, and the entire business community would be watching. "I can't believe we're both nominees," Leila said as we reviewed the invitation in my office. "When was the last time siblings from the same family were recognized in the same year?" I smiled, knowing she was thinking about how proud their parents would be. But I also knew, with the sharp clarity of hindsight, that Aella would see this event as her chance to reclaim the spotlight she'd lost over the past few months. "Are you prepared for your sister to make this evening about herself?" I asked gently. Leila sighed, setting down the invitation. "Aella's been ... different lately. Mom says she's been asking a lot of questions about you. About us. That was an understatement. Over the past month, Aella's pursuit had escalated from casual coffee invitations to increasingly elaborate schemes. She'd shown up at my office 3 times, with business proposals that were thinly veiled attempts to spend time together. She'd started attending every networking event I was known to frequent, always positioning herself strategically in my line of sight. Most tellingly, she'd begun criticizing Leila in subtle but persistent ways. "Leila works too much," she'd told mutual acquaintances. "I worry she's becoming one of those career women who forgets how to have fun. Or my sister's brilliant, but she's so serious all the time. Some men find that intimidating, you know?" What Aella didn't realize was that her campaign was backfiring spectacularly. Every attempt to diminish Leila only highlighted the qualities that made me respect and love her more. Every manipulation made Aella appear more desperate and less attractive the night of the awards ceremony. I arrived at the Brookhaven Grand Ballroom, the same venue where I'd first met the Sterling sisters, under vastly different circumstances. This time, I was Leila's date, wearing a custom tuxedo that reflected my business success, and carrying myself with the confidence of a man who'd built something meaningful. Leila looked stunning in a midnight blue dress that complemented her dark hair and serious demeanor, but what took my breath away wasn't her beauty, it was the quiet confidence she radiated. This was her night to be recognized for work that mattered, and she owned every moment of it. "There are my 2 stars," called Victoria Sterling, Leila, and Aella's mother, as we approached the family table. The older woman embraced us both warmly. "Quillen, we're so proud of what you've accomplished. And the way you support our Leila, it's wonderful to see her so happy." I caught the flicker of pain that crossed Aella's face at her mother's words. She looked breathtaking as always, wearing a scarlet dress that commanded attention. But there was something brittle in her smile as she watched her family fawn over my relationship with her sister. "Congratulations on the nomination, Quillen," Aella said, her voice honey-sweet, but her eyes calculating. "Though I have to say, some people are wondering if the Meridian success was just beginner's luck." "Aella," Victoria warned sharply. "What?" "I'm just repeating what I heard at the Chamber of Commerce meeting," Aella replied innocently. "Of course I defended you. I told them that anyone who spends as much time in the office as you do is bound to get lucky eventually." The comment was designed to undermine my achievements while simultaneously criticizing my dedication to work, and by extension, the time I spent with Leila. It was a masterclass in passive aggression. But I'd learned something important over the past 6 months. The best response to manipulation wasn't anger or defensiveness, it was complete indifference. "Lucky or not," I replied calmly, "the client results speak for themselves." Before Aella could respond, the ceremony began. Throughout the evening, I watched her carefully orchestrated campaign to reclaim center stage. She laughed too loudly, at jokes that weren't funny, touched the arms of men who clearly weren't interested, and made sure every conversation somehow circled back to her own accomplishments. When they announced Leila's win for legal excellence, the entire table erupted in cheers. I stood to kiss her, pride swelling in my chest as she made her way to the stage. Her acceptance speech was gracious and focused on the environmental victims she'd helped. And I fell in love with her all over again, watching her handle the spotlight with such dignity. But even in that moment of triumph, I noticed Aella's reaction. Instead of genuine happiness for her sister, her face showed barely concealed resentment. She applauded, but her smile never reached her eyes. When Hayes and Associates won Marketing Innovation of the Year, Leila was the first person on her feet cheering for me. As I made my way to the stage, I caught Aella whispering something to the man beside her, something that made him look at me with new skepticism. My acceptance speech focused on authentic storytelling, act in marketing, and the importance of understanding your client's true needs. As I spoke, I could see the Brookhaven business community seeing me in a new light, not as the struggling agency owner they'd once dismissed, but as an innovator and thought leader. The real drama came during the networking portion of the evening. I was discussing a potential collaboration with the mayor when Aella appeared at my elbow, radiant and charming as always. "Quillen, you must meet Harrison Webb," she said, introducing a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. "Harry owns 3 companies in the Harbor District. Harry, this is Quillen Hayes, you know, the one we were talking about." Harrison's handshake was cold, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ah, yes, the young man who's been making quite a name for himself lately. Ella was just telling me some interesting stories about your ... methods." The implication was clear. Ella had been spreading rumors about my business practices, trying to undermine my reputation in the professional community. It was a nuclear option that revealed just how desperate she'd become. "I hope they were entertaining stories," I replied evenly. Ella has always had a vivid imagination. Before the conversation could escalate, Leila appeared at my side with champagne and a warm smile that immediately diffused the tension. "Harrison, how nice to see you," she said graciously. "I heard your company is interested in expanding your environmental compliance programs." "That's wonderful. It's so rare to see businesses taking proactive responsibility." Within minutes, she'd completely redirected the conversation to substantive business topics, leaving Aella standing awkwardly to the side as Harrison became engaged in discussing real opportunities rather than gossip. As the evening wound down, I realized this had been Aella's last stand. Her attempts to sabotage my reputation had failed. Her efforts to overshadow Leila had backfired, and her desperation was becoming visible to everyone around her. "Did you see how she tried to poison Harrison Webb against you?" Leila asked as we left the ballroom. "I saw it," I replied. "I also saw how effortlessly you neutralized it." "She's my sister, and I love her," Leila said carefully. "But what she did tonight crossed every line. She's becoming someone I don't recognize." As we waited for the valet to bring our car, I noticed Aella emerging from the ballroom alone. Her parents had already left, and whatever date she'd brought seemed to have abandoned her. For the first time since I'd known her in either timeline, Aella Sterling looked genuinely isolated. She saw us waiting and approached. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Leila," she said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Congratulations on your award. You deserved it." The words seemed to cost her considerable effort, and for a moment I saw past the manipulative behavior to the broken woman underneath. "Thank you, Aella," Leila replied gently. "That means a lot coming from you." Aella nodded, then looked at me directly for the first time all evening. "Quillen, I'm sorry for what I said to Harrison. That wasn't fair." The apology surprised me, but I could see the defeat in her eyes. This wasn't strategic. This was genuine surrender. "Apology accepted," I said simply, as Aella walked away toward her own car. Shoulders slumped in defeat. I felt an unexpected mix of relief and sadness. In my original timeline, she'd been the one with everything while I'd been left with nothing. Tonight, those roles had completely reversed. "You know what the most beautiful part of tonight was?" Leila said as we drove through the city's streets toward her apartment. "What's that?" "Watching you handle everything with such grace. 6 months ago, if someone had tried to sabotage your reputation like that, you would have been devastated. You didn't even flinch." She was right. The Quillen Hayes from my original timeline would have been crushed by Aella's manipulations, would have spent weeks obsessing over what people thought, would have doubted his own worth. But this version of me, armed with the wisdom of painful experience, understood that other people's opinions couldn't diminish what I'd actually built. "You know what I realized tonight?" I said, pulling into her driveway. "Tell me." "In my original life, I spent so much energy trying to prove I was worthy of someone's love. Tonight, I realized I've finally become someone who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone." Leila smiled, the kind of genuine expression that never failed to make my heart skip. "Maybe that's because you're with someone who loves you for who you actually are, not who you think you should be." As we walked up to her apartment, I reflected on the strange justice of my second chance. I'd been given the opportunity to rewrite my life, and instead of using it for revenge, I'd used it for growth. The universe had taught me the difference between love and infatuation, between building something real and chasing something superficial. Aella would have to find her own path to happiness now, one that didn't involve manipulating others or expecting the world to cater to her whims. Tonight had been her wake-up call, and while it might be painful, it was also necessary. But for Leila and me, tonight had been a celebration of everything we'd built together, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of deep compatibility that couldn't be faked or forced. 6 months ago, I'd made a choice at a charity gala that changed everything. Tonight, I was finally able to see the full consequences of that choice, and they were more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. Up next, we've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.